My name is Janice, and I am 35 years old. Birthdays are supposed to feel like proof you mattered for at least one night. Mine felt like a performance everyone agreed to show up for, long enough to take photos, eat the food I paid for, and leave behind the kind of mess that says, "Thanks for hosting, now clean up after us." It was a Friday, which meant people lingered. Not because they were having the time of their lives, but because no one had anywhere urgent to be. The kind of night where the music stays low, the wine flows just enough to soften conversations, and you find yourself smiling at people you'd never invite if blood didn't come with obligations. My parents arrived first. My mother kissed my cheek in that quick, dry way that doesn't leave warmth behind. She handed me a gift bag like she'd grabbed it on the way out the door. Inside was a cardigan still in its plastic wrap and a candle that smelled vaguely like antiseptic. Something clean, something that tried too hard to be neutral. She smiled like this was thoughtful, like buying a thing was the same as knowing me. My dad followed her in, carrying a bottle of cheap red wine and wearing the same careful expression he always wore around my mother, like he was trying not to set off a landmine. He hugged me longer than she did, but even his arms felt distracted, as if his mind was already preparing for whatever tension would inevitably creep into the room. My sister came next, late, rushing in with 2 kids and a cloud of exhaustion. She didn't say happy birthday right away. She said, "Do you have juice?" while her son bolted toward the living room and her daughter trailed behind like a small shadow. Then she hugged me with one arm, her eyes already scanning for somewhere to sit. I told myself not to take it personally. I was used to being the place people landed when they were tired of holding their own lives together. Cousins drifted in after that. 2 of them. Loud enough to fill silence. Not close enough to know me. They brought store-bought cookies and acted like they'd brought the moon. Natalie from work arrived last, balancing a tray of cupcakes and an energy that didn't belong in my family's atmosphere. She hugged me and actually looked me in the eye. "I'm so glad you did this," she said. "You deserve to be celebrated." The words hit me in the chest, because they were simple and true and unfamiliar coming from someone who wasn't obligated. I kept things basic. Takeout containers lined up on the counter, a playlist humming in the background, wine, soda, ice melting too fast in plastic cups. People moved around my kitchen like it belonged to them. My mother reorganized my napkins without asking. My dad refilled everyone's drink. My sister's kids tore through my living room and laughed like my home was a playground built for them. At one point, my nephew ran upstairs and I called after him, "Hey, no running upstairs." My sister didn't move. She just said, "He's fine," the way people say it when they expect you to accommodate. Natalie watched me for a second, her smile flickering like she'd noticed something beneath the surface. Then she asked me if I wanted help in the kitchen. I almost said no out of habit, but she was already rolling up her sleeves. We ate, we laughed, we pretended. My mom told a story about my sister's kids that somehow became a story about how hard my mother worked, how much she'd sacrificed, how motherhood is the only thing that really matters. My sister nodded along, tired, grateful, numb. My dad stayed quiet. My cousins drank and talked over each other. Natalie asked me questions about my job, my plans, my life, things my family never asked unless they needed something. Close to midnight, people started trickling out. My mother hugged me again, quick and light. My father said, "Call us," like I didn't know they rarely answered when I did. My sister gathered her kids with the weary patience of someone used to chaos, and as she left, she said, "We should do this more." She didn't mean it. I stood in the doorway, waving goodbye, feeling something close to relief. The night had been normal enough that my guard had lowered. For a few hours, I'd almost believed I could have a birthday without paying for it twice, once with money, once with emotional labor. When the last car pulled away, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling. Then I went upstairs. I was halfway to my bedroom when I saw my closet door. Not wide open, just slightly ajar, a detail so small most people wouldn't notice, but I noticed because I am the kind of person who notices when a room feels touched. I stared at it for a moment, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I left it like that. Maybe I'd been distracted. Maybe one of the kids peeked inside. I opened it fully and crouched down behind the row of sweaters where my safe sat. The space was empty. For a second, my brain refused to cooperate. I stared at the floor like it was playing a trick on me, like the safe would appear again if I blinked hard enough. Then panic hit, hot and immediate. I tore through the closet. I yanked out baskets, shoved hangers aside, checked drawers I knew had nothing to do with it. I even opened the attic access like logic had left the building and my body was searching on instinct alone. Nothing. The safe was gone. Inside it were things I didn't even wear but couldn't lose. My grandmother's rings, 2 bracelets from my graduation, an inheritance piece I'd been too afraid to put on because I knew how easily things disappear when people feel entitled to them. Cash I'd been saving, $5,000, tucked away for a solo trip I'd promised myself I'd take one day. My passport, my birth certificate, the kinds of documents you don't realize are valuable until someone takes them. I searched my bedroom, the hallway, the linen closet, the garage. I checked under beds, behind boxes, in places that made no sense. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, nothing else missing. Just the safe. And then the truth crept in, slow and awful. Everyone who'd been in my house had access. My parents had spare keys. My sister did too. Natalie had been downstairs the whole time. My cousins didn't have keys, and they weren't subtle people. The only ones who'd gone upstairs were my sister's kids, and they couldn't carry a safe that heavy out of my house without help. I sat on the edge of my bed with the lamp on, my heart pounding, my mind racing in circles that all led to the same place. I didn't sleep. By morning, my denial was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I made coffee I couldn't drink and started calling people. Natalie answered immediately, horrified. My cousins answered, confused. My dad didn't pick up. My mom didn't either. That made my skin go tight. I texted her. Did you take the safe? The message showed read almost instantly. No reply. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Your sister's children need this money. You don't have kids. You don't need it. It's not personal. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She said it like it was obvious, like stealing from me was simply reallocating resources where she thought they belonged. I stared at the screen, remembering her standing in my kitchen the night before, smiling, holding a candle like she was celebrating me, while upstairs my safe was already gone. She robbed me on my birthday, in my house, while pretending to love me. I didn't call. I didn't reply. I grabbed my jacket, didn't even put on shoes, and drove to my parents' house with adrenaline in my veins and no plan except one. I wasn't going there to talk. I don't remember the drive to my parents' house. I remember the sound of gravel kicking up when I pulled into the driveway too fast. I remember leaving my car door open, keys still in the ignition, like some part of me didn't believe I'd be there long enough to need them. Everything between my house and theirs blurred into a single, sharp intention. I wasn't rehearsing what I'd say. I wasn't calming myself down. I was past that point. I walked in without knocking. I used to do that all the time, back when I still believed this was a place I was welcome. The front door opened into the familiar chaos of my childhood home, the smell of cereal and coffee mixing with the sound of cartoons blaring from the living room. One of my sister's kids was sitting cross-legged on the floor, tapping at a phone screen like it was the most important thing in the world. My mom was in the kitchen, pouring milk into a bowl. She looked up and said my name like nothing had happened, like she hadn't emptied my safe and texted me about it like she'd borrowed sugar. My sister was on the couch, half awake, scrolling on her phone. She glanced up, saw my face, and immediately looked back down. The kids were loud. The TV was loud. Everything was loud except the thing that mattered. I said one thing. Where's my stuff? My mom barely reacted. She sighed, like I'd interrupted her morning routine over something minor. She told me I was being dramatic and that I needed to calm down, that there were children in the house. The way she said it made it clear she expected me to lower my voice, lower myself, like I always did. I didn't. I walked past her and started opening cabinets. I didn't explain myself. I didn't ask permission. I knew she hadn't sold everything yet. It hadn't even been 12 hours since she sent that text. She wouldn't have had time. The hall closet was the third place I checked. I pushed aside towels and winter coats, and there it was. My safe, shoved into the back like a dirty secret. The lid was off. The lock was broken. My stomach twisted when I saw it, sitting there so casually, like it had never been mine at all. I pulled it out and opened it fully. My documents were still inside. My birth certificate, my passport, a couple of jewelry boxes she hadn't gotten to yet. I checked them one by one, my hands moving fast, my heart racing. The rings were gone. The bracelets were gone. The cash was gone. All of it. I turned around and said it again, louder this time. Where's the money? That was when my dad came in from the backyard. He took one look at me standing there with the safe in my hands and asked what was going on, like he didn't already know. I didn't answer him. I didn't look at him. I was done translating reality for people who benefited from not understanding it. My mom finally snapped. She started talking fast, justifying everything at once. She said my sister's boys had been coming home upset, complaining they didn't have phones like the other kids. She said they were getting bullied. She said she couldn't stand seeing them like that anymore. She said she panicked. She said she did what any mother would do. With my money. I looked over at the coffee table. 2 brand new iPhone boxes sat there, open. The kids were already using them, swiping and laughing like this was just another Tuesday. You stole from me, I said, to buy phones. My sister didn't say a word. She just stared at her lap, shoulders slumped, like she wanted to sink into the couch and disappear. I couldn't tell if she was ashamed or just exhausted, but she didn't defend it. She didn't correct my mom. She let it happen. My mom, on the other hand, doubled down. She said I had no kids, no real financial responsibilities, no reason to hoard money. She said I was selfish. She said family comes first, like that was the end of the conversation, and not the excuse it always was. Something in me snapped clean in half. I called her stupid, loud enough that the room went silent. The cartoon kept playing, but the kids had stopped moving. My dad stepped forward like he was about to intervene, but I told him to shut up too. Everything came out messy and sharp. I don't remember every word, just the feeling of finally saying what I'd swallowed for years. I told her if she wanted to play Robin Hood, she should rob a bank, not her own daughter. The kids ran into the bedroom. My sister looked like she might cry or scream or vanish. My mom kept yelling, but I was already upstairs. I knew where she kept things. She still had some of my jewelry in her dresser, the pieces she hadn't sold or given away yet. I found them, stuffed them into my pockets without ceremony. Then I went into their bedroom. I knew exactly where they kept cash, an old envelope tucked into the back of a sock drawer. Emergency money, they called it. I took $2,000. It wasn't even close to what I'd lost, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. I came back downstairs holding the envelope. I'm done, I said. I don't care if you call the police. I'll report the theft myself and drag every last one of you into it. My mom looked at me like I was the one destroying the family, like I was the problem, not the person who had robbed me while smiling at my birthday cake. I walked out. That night, around 9, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. I opened it, and my dad stood on the porch under the buzzing light like he was stopping by for coffee, not showing up after his wife stole from me. He didn't look sorry. He looked tired, like this was an inconvenience he wanted to be over. He said my mom had been crying, that I'd really upset her, that things got out of hand, and maybe my anger had pushed me into saying things I didn't mean. Then he said the line that made my stomach turn. You know how your mother is. Like it was a quirk, like it wasn't a crime. He kept going, calm and measured. He said my sister was struggling, that the kids were having a hard time, that they needed help, that my mom did what she thought was best, that I shouldn't take it personally. I asked him one question. If I did that to her, I said, if I walked into her house, stole thousands of dollars, and bought myself something nice, would you be standing here asking her to forgive me? He didn't answer. He looked down at the concrete like it might save him. Then he told me to bring the money back. He said it quietly, like maybe I wouldn't hear how insane it sounded, that I should return the cash I took so things wouldn't get uglier, so the family could move on. I closed the door in his face. Not angrily, not dramatically, just shut it, solid and final. That night my house felt poisoned. Every corner reminded me of what had been taken, what had been touched, what had been violated. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't sit still. So I opened my laptop and did the one thing that felt like control. I started looking for somewhere else to live. I didn't sleep that night. Not the restless kind of tossing and turning where your body is tired but your mind won't shut up. This was different. I lay completely still, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the last 24 hours like it was evidence in a trial my own family didn't know they were on trial for. The sound of my father's voice kept looping in my head. You know how your mother is. As if that explained anything. As if those words were some ancient spell that turned theft into personality, betrayal into inconvenience, and my pain into something optional. By morning, the house felt wrong. Not messy, not unsafe, just altered. Like every room had been breathed in by someone who didn't care whether I noticed. I stood in my bedroom doorway for a long time, looking at the closet, at the empty space where the safe used to be. It felt like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue, even though it hurts. I made coffee and didn't drink it, again. I kept expecting my phone to ring, my mother demanding I apologize, my father asking me to come back and talk like adults, my sister trying to smooth things over the way she always did, exhausted before the conversation even started. Nothing. That silence wasn't peace, it was strategy. Around noon, I forced myself to sit down at my laptop. I hadn't planned to move yet, not really. But after what happened, staying felt like waiting for the next violation, like telling them where to find me if they decided they weren't done taking. I opened a real estate site I hadn't touched in years. I didn't search for dream homes, I searched for distance. Towns far enough that just dropping by wouldn't happen. Places quiet enough that no one would recognize my last name. I wasn't running from my life, I was stepping out of theirs. I bookmarked a few listings, nothing special. 2 bedrooms, old kitchens, places that smelled like fresh paint and possibility instead of obligation. I told myself I was just looking, that I didn't have to decide anything yet. That lasted until my phone buzzed. It was my sister. I'm sorry. Just 2 words. No explanation, no defense, no request. I stared at the screen longer than I probably should have. Of all of them, she was the only one whose silence had felt complicated. I knew what it was like to live in that house, to survive by shrinking, to let things slide because pushing back took energy you didn't have. I typed back slowly. I'm not mad at you. I know this wasn't your choice. She responded almost immediately. I didn't know she took that much. I thought it was just the phones. That made my chest tighten. So even she hadn't known the full extent. Even she had been fed a watered-down version that made it easier to swallow. We didn't talk long. She asked if I was okay. I told her the truth. Not really, but I will be. I didn't tell her I was looking to leave. Not yet. I needed one thing in my life that wasn't immediately reported back to my parents. The afternoon passed slowly. I tried to work but couldn't focus. Every time a car passed outside, my shoulders tensed, waiting for someone to show up unannounced again. That's when the bank called. At first, I assumed it was about the replacement documents I'd requested earlier that morning. The woman on the line sounded professional, calm, but there was a careful edge to her voice. Janice, she said, we just wanted to confirm that you were not in the branch today asking about jewelry appraisals or trust documentation. My stomach dropped. No, I said, I wasn't. There was a pause. Your mother came in earlier, she continued. She asked questions regarding some appraisal records associated with items listed under your name. Specifically, your grandmother's jewelry. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Those appraisals were old, years old. I remembered the day clearly. My mom had been there with me, helping with the paperwork, holding the envelope while I signed. I hadn't thought about it since. She was trying to access values, the woman said gently. We didn't provide any information. We flagged the visit and wanted to notify you. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, not driving anywhere. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. She hadn't just taken what was in the safe. She was still looking for ways to extract more. That was the moment something inside me went very still. This wasn't about anger anymore. This wasn't about getting my money back. This was about safety. That night, there was another knock on my door. This time it was my sister. No warning, no text. Just her standing there looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook when I let her inside. She sat down and cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, exhausted tears that kept coming like she'd been holding them back for too long. She told me she'd found the empty jewelry boxes in my mom's room, tucked into a drawer beneath scarves. She recognized one immediately, a blue velvet box that used to sit on my dresser when we were kids. She said she asked Mom about it and got snapped at, told to stop snooping. That's when she knew. Then she told me something else. My mom hadn't just bought phones. She'd bought herself a new laptop, paid in cash, bragged about it like it was a bargain. My sister hadn't connected it before. Now she couldn't unsee it. She keeps saying you'll cool off, my sister whispered. That you'll come back. She says you always do. That sentence settled into my bones. That was their plan. Wait me out. Let the storm pass. Resume as normal. I hugged my sister, feeling the weight of everything we hadn't said growing up. When she left, I didn't hesitate. I went back to the listings I'd saved. One of them stood out. A small 2-bedroom in a quiet town about an hour and a half away. Not glamorous. A porch, a fireplace, a backyard that looked like it had never hosted a family argument in its life. The next morning, I went to see it. I signed that afternoon. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell Natalie. That night, I got a new phone number. I kept the old one active for paperwork, but I set it to Do Not Disturb and stopped answering it entirely. I gave the new number to exactly 3 people. My sister, my landlord, Natalie. Then I started packing. Slowly. Deliberately. one box at a time. Every drawer I emptied felt like loosening a knot that had been tightening for years. I didn't rush. I wanted the leaving to feel intentional, not reactive. By the end of the week, the house felt empty in a good way, like it was letting me go. And for the first time since my birthday, I wasn't afraid of what they'd do next, because I wasn't going to be here when they did it. Moving quietly teaches you things. You start noticing how much noise you used to make just to survive, the way you'd over-explain your decisions, the way you'd brace yourself before answering the phone, the way your body learned to tense before your mind even caught up. As I packed, I realized how deeply trained I'd been to expect interruption, justification, resistance. Now there was none. I packed after work, one drawer at a time, folding clothes I hadn't worn in years, setting aside items I didn't want to carry into whatever came next. The safe stayed empty. I left it that way on purpose. I didn't want to replace it yet. I didn't want to pretend I was already healed. 3 days before I planned to leave, my old phone buzzed again in the kitchen drawer. I hadn't checked it since I switched numbers, but something made me pull it out. Not panic, not fear, curiosity. 17 missed calls. Voicemails stacked like evidence. I didn't listen. Instead, I saw a new notification from my bank. This time, it wasn't a courtesy call. It was an alert, an attempted inquiry on my account regarding archived appraisal documents. My breath caught. Those documents were tied to my grandmother's jewelry, the same pieces my mother had already stolen, the same items she'd justified taking because children needed them more. I called the bank immediately. The woman on the line recognized my name before I finished spelling it. That alone told me how serious this was. Yes, she confirmed. Your mother came in earlier today. She requested information on the appraised value of several items listed under your name. Did she get anything? I asked. No, she said. We refused access and flagged the account, but we needed to inform you. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was extraction. She wasn't done. She was still calculating, still seeing how much more she could take, still treating my life like a supply chain. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that scared even me, because suddenly everything made sense. The birthday, the timing, the distraction. It wasn't impulse. It was opportunity. That night, there was another knock on my door. I knew it wouldn't be my parents. They never came themselves when things got uncomfortable. They sent messengers, enablers, people who still had access to my sympathy. This time it was my sister. She looked worse than before, pale, hollow, like the house had finally started taking its toll. She walked in, closed the door behind her, and said, "She's still digging." I nodded. I know. She sat down and pulled something out of her bag. Empty jewelry boxes. 3 of them. One blue velvet, one cracked leather, one plastic with a faded gold trim. All mine. I found them in her dresser, she said quietly. She told me to stop snooping. That was the moment I felt the last thread snap. She bought a new laptop, my sister continued. Paid cash. She keeps saying it was on sale. I closed my eyes. The money hadn't just gone to the kids. It had gone to her. And that was the part I couldn't forgive. Not because of the money, because of the intent. She didn't see me as her daughter. She saw me as a resource that hadn't been fully drained yet. I told my sister I was leaving. Not thinking about it. Not planning. Leaving. She didn't ask where. She just nodded and said, "Good." We sat there in silence for a long time. Then she asked if she could help. I told her yes. Just this once. The next morning, I finalized everything. Utilities transferred. Mail forwarding delayed. Lease termination confirmed. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't give my parents a chance to talk. Because talking was how they stalled until you gave up. That night, my sister helped me load the last boxes into my car. It was still dark. The street quiet. No witnesses. Before she left, she handed me a small paper bag. Inside were snacks, a folded note, and a photo of us as kids. Sitting on the floor of our old bedroom, surrounded by toys, smiling like nothing bad could ever reach us. "I won't tell them where you are," she said. "I know," I replied. That was all. At sunrise, I locked the door behind me for the last time. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean, like I'd stepped out of a room filled with smoke and finally found air. And somewhere behind me, without knowing it yet, my parents were about to realize something terrifying. They hadn't just lost access to my money. They'd lost access to me. The drive felt longer than it actually was. Not because the road was difficult, but because every mile put distance between me and a version of myself that had been slowly eroded for years. I avoided the highway, took back roads instead, the kind that wind through towns where no one is in a hurry and nothing feels urgent unless you let it. I didn't want the speed. I wanted the separation to register. When I arrived, the town looked exactly like I'd hoped it would. Quiet, ordinary, almost anonymous. Mailboxes leaned slightly, like they'd been there longer than anyone could remember. Dogs wandered yards without leashes. A diner sat on the corner with a flickering neon sign missing part of a letter, and for some reason, that imperfection made me trust it more. No one knew me here. No one cared who my parents were or what kind of daughter I'd been. The house itself wasn't special. 2 bedrooms. A porch swing that creaked when you sat down. Chipped paint near the baseboards. A fireplace that smelled faintly of old wood and dust. But it was empty in the best way. Untouched. Neutral. There were no memories embedded in the walls yet, no expectations waiting in corners. I slept on a mattress on the floor the first night, surrounded by unopened boxes. I ate a sandwich with one hand and scrolled through my new phone with the other. No missed calls, no texts piling up. No dread sitting in my stomach, waiting for the next confrontation. I slept for 9 straight hours. No dreams, no nightmares, just sleep. The next few days unfolded quietly. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. I didn't rush to make the place perfect. I wanted to feel each decision, where the books would go, which mug would be my morning one, what drawer my keys would live in. Small choices that belonged entirely to me. I walked to the grocery store, met my neighbor, an older woman who offered me tomatoes from her garden without asking a single personal question. She didn't want my story. She just wanted to share what she had. It felt radical. I didn't introduce myself as anyone's daughter or sister. I was just Janice. Back in the city, things were unraveling. I didn't see it directly. I felt it through secondhand tremors. My sister called once, voice tight, and told me she'd finally told them I'd moved. Not where. Just that I was gone and didn't want contact. She thought it might calm them. It didn't. My mother lost it, apparently. Accused my sister of betrayal. Said no daughter of hers disappears like that. That families don't abandon each other. My father paced the house, angry in that quiet, coiled way that always made things worse. He told my sister that if she knew what was good for her, she'd fix things. Fix things. That was always the phrase. As if my existence was a mess to be cleaned up instead of a person to be protected. A day later, Natalie called. She sounded cautious, like she didn't know how much to tell me. Then she said my mom had messaged her on Facebook. A long paragraph about worry and regret and how families always come back together. How she didn't know where she'd gone wrong, how she missed me. Natalie didn't reply. Instead, she told me something that stuck. Your absence is louder than your presence ever was. She was right. They hadn't expected me to leave quietly. They'd expected yelling, tears, threats, something they could react to, something they could manipulate. This silence, this clean break, was something they didn't know how to handle. A week after I moved, they showed up at my old place. My landlord texted me, confused. Said a woman was crying in the driveway and a man was yelling at the front door. He didn't give them any information. Just told them I'd moved out weeks ago and wasn't forwarding mail. Apparently my mom cried right there in the driveway. Apparently my dad kept asking who I'd gone with, like I couldn't possibly have chosen to be alone. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard that. I felt distance. A healthy, necessary distance. My sister asked if she'd made things worse by telling them I'd moved. I told her no. Let them feel it. Let them sit in the silence they created. Life here settled into something almost gentle. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Evenings with the windows open and nothing but birds and the occasional dog barking in the distance. I went entire days without thinking about my family. When I did think of them, it didn't come with that sharp sting anymore. It felt like remembering something that happened to someone else. I changed my routines. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. I stopped bracing myself for knocks at the door. No one here knew what my birthday had turned into. No one knew about the safe, or the jewelry, or the betrayal. And no one asked. That was the most healing part. 2 months passed like that. 2 months of quiet, of rebuilding my sense of self without an audience. 2 months of realizing how much energy I'd spent trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. And then my sister called. She said my mom talks about me like I've died. Brings me up at dinner. Says she doesn't understand how this happened. My dad paces the house, waiting for the phone to ring, like that might undo everything. They still don't know where I am, and that not knowing is what's eating them alive. I told my sister she could say whatever she wanted except my location. Not the town, not the street, not even a hint. She agreed, and for the first time in my life, I believed her. Because some bonds don't survive truth, but some do, and the rest don't deserve access anymore. Silence does strange things to people who are used to control. At first, they treat it like a glitch, something temporary, a phase. My sister told me that in the beginning, my mom kept setting an extra place at the table without realizing it. She'd catch herself halfway through dinner, fork paused in midair, staring at the empty chair like it might explain itself if she waited long enough. My dad would clear his throat, say something about the weather, and the moment would pass. Then the silence stretched. Weeks turned into a month, then 2, and nothing changed. That was when the panic set in. My mom started calling everyone. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years, cousins she'd once accused of not caring enough. Even an old high school friend of mine she barely tolerated when we were kids. She asked if anyone had seen me, if I'd mentioned a new job, a move, a breakup, anything. She framed it as concern, but my sister could hear the desperation under it. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about not being able to reach me. My dad handled it differently. He got angry. Restless. He paced the house like a man waiting for a storm that refused to arrive. He kept asking my sister who I'd gone with, like I couldn't possibly have chosen solitude, like independence was something that only happened when someone else dragged you into it. When my sister told him I'd left alone, that I didn't want contact, he laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. He said, "She'll be back. She always comes back." That was the moment my sister stopped defending him. Back in my new town, I didn't know any of this until days later. I was too busy learning how quiet could feel like safety instead of abandonment. I established routines that belonged only to me. Morning walks past houses where no one watched too closely. A diner where the waitress remembered my order without asking my last name. Evenings by the fireplace, reading books I'd owned for years but never had the peace to finish. The safe stayed empty. I kept it that way on purpose. I didn't need a physical reminder of what I'd lost or what I was protecting anymore. My boundaries were no longer locked in steel. They were built into distance, into choice, into the simple fact that no one knew how to find me. Every once in a while, I checked my old phone. The voicemail box stayed full. Messages stacked on top of each other. Voices I recognized too well, begging, demanding, explaining, reframing. I never listened. Silence wasn't punishment. It was preservation. One afternoon, my sister sent me a photo. It was our parents' house, taken from across the street. My mom stood on the porch, arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring down the road like she expected me to appear out of thin air. My dad sat on the steps beside her, head in his hands. "They don't know what to do," my sister wrote. "They've never had to sit with consequences before." I stared at the image for a long time, not with satisfaction, with clarity. They weren't suffering because I'd left. They were suffering because they couldn't reach into my life anymore and rearrange it to suit themselves. The theft had been their final attempt to remind me who had power. My disappearance took that power away completely. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address. I recognized my mom's handwriting immediately. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for a full day, like it was something radioactive. When I finally did, I read it slowly, carefully. She wrote about worry, about regret, about how she never meant to hurt me. She wrote that families make mistakes and that love means forgiveness. She wrote that she missed me every day and didn't understand how things had gone so wrong. She didn't write the word sorry. She didn't mention the safe. She didn't mention the jewelry. She didn't mention the bank visit. She didn't acknowledge that what she did was theft. She only wrote about how my absence made her feel. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Because silence, I'd learned, was the only boundary she couldn't argue with. My sister and I stayed in touch, carefully, gently. She told me she was saving up to leave too, that living there felt heavier now, like the house itself had turned against her. I told her she'd always have a place with me if she needed it. That was the first promise I'd made in a long time that didn't come with conditions. Months passed. The sharp edges of anger dulled into something steadier. I stopped replaying the birthday in my head. Stopped imagining alternate endings where my mom chose differently. I stopped hoping for closure that would never come in the form I wanted. Instead, I built something new, a life where my worth wasn't measured by what I could provide, where love wasn't something I had to earn by staying quiet, where my presence was invited, not assumed. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what would happen if I went back. If I stood in front of them and let them see the version of me that didn't flinch anymore, but the thought passed as quickly as it came. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth was already living in the silence between us. They had stolen from me on my birthday and called it sacrifice. I had walked away and called it survival. And the difference between those two choices was everything. I wake up now without checking my phone. I breathe easier. I laugh more. I trust my instincts again. I don't lock my life away anymore. Not in safes, not behind apologies, not behind excuses meant to protect people who never protected me. Family, I've learned, is not defined by who has access to you. It's defined by who respects your boundaries when they don't. And in the quiet of this new life, far from the house where my trust was taken piece by piece, I finally understand something I never did before. Leaving didn't make me heartless. It made me free.